In less than a week, I'm paddling the Saguenay Fjord in Canada. Another country, water I've never touched, with tidal current strong enough to stop even the strongest kayaker from paddling forward. Early on, I asked myself, what do I actually need to know to get through this safely? Not every single detail. My life is too busy for that. I wanted to understand the things that could actually end the trip if I got them wrong. Now, you may not be interested in paddling the Saguenay Fjord. Maybe you're not into kayak camping at all. But if you've ever looked at a stretch of coast that you've never paddled and thought, I don't know what I don't know here, then this episode's for you. I'm going to show you exactly what I did to give me the best chance of success on this trip, how I found the real dangers, how I researched them, and how I built a mental picture of a place I've never been before, so I could make good decisions when I'm actually on the water. And that's the point, making good decisions on the water. That's why this process works, whether you're planning a week in Canada or just a simple Saturday morning paddle. Now friends, right off the top, this is the closest you're going to get with me on the Saguenay Fjord. I gave myself permission to capture some footage and come back and see what happens. Now, what I realized pretty early on was that there are some permitting involved because it is a national park in Canada and there are some fees involved. So you're not going to see an episode of me on the Saguenay until at a point where this channel is my full-time job and I'm making this content for you, and then I'll take you to the Saguenay. However, I'd always intended to make this episode for you. Now, the first move on a trip like this for me honestly isn't research. It's eliminating the things I already know and already have. So gear. Gear is second nature to me at this point. I've spent a lot of time kayak camping and kayaking in areas that are very comfortable to me. I don't have to think too much about the environment, keep it safe, obviously, but I don't have a lot of environmental considerations, so I can really focus on my kit, and I feel great about my kit. Food, sorted. I know the meals I want to take for this type of trip. I know what I'm going to be able to carry and not going to be able to carry. Those logistics are manageable. Also, in preparation for this trip, we did a shakedown trip a couple of weeks ago where we got everything out, we tested everything. Most things have been sitting in our storage bins for the winter. So got everything out, tested it out, and just helped Wendy get a sense of like, what do I need here? What do I not need here? So that, again, so she has that in her mental map. It's an easy thing to cross off the list well ahead of time. So what was genuinely new on this trip? What did I actually need to figure out? I thought about this from the standpoint of risk, challenges, and decision making. The first thing I go to anytime I paddle is the weather. With this trip being so far out, clearly you can't figure out the weather yet. We're going to continue to make weather decisions as we get closer to the day we launch. When I looked at that risk challenges, gear obviously wasn't one of them. We'd already crossed that off the list. We looked at regulations in the park of what we could and couldn't do in the park. We thought about the drive to Canada and what could and couldn't we take. None of these are life-threatening, but they could stop or hinder the trip significantly. So those are all pretty obvious things. But the big thing that we came to was the current in the Saguenay. At certain windows, it physically won't let you paddle potentially in the direction you want to go. So it became clear pretty early on that the current was the thing that was the biggest unknown in my mental map of this. I studied that across different times of the tide along our route, and I found patterns. Certain areas that never fully flooded into the fjord on the flood tide like you might expect, or certain sides of the fjord that seemed to get more current than other sides of the fjord at different times of the tide. I also started to see these areas that really became impassable for our direction of travel, places we didn't want to be working against the current. But it was still a lot of noise, and I didn't really have a great way of describing it. Nothing I could easily think about the morning before we got on the water. So what I did on this site is I set up these virtual stations all along the way, and every few days I would make notes of what's happening them across different times of the tides. And I started to notice patterns. And I started to create some loose rules that the south side of Ile St. Louis has less flow than the North Channel, that Cape St. Marguerite experienced faster currents due to its constriction in the fjord, compared to neighboring areas just a half a mile away. I made a few other observations and a few other notes, and if you want a PFD of my Saguenay tide research, I'll share a link with you at the end to get your own copy, all of the info and data that I gathered for this trip. In all of this, I wasn't looking for certainty. I was just looking to build a reliable enough picture of what I might expect at different parts along the trip so I can make good decisions the whole way through. As I've mentioned before, I'm always building mental maps of the areas I paddle in and checking to see if that map is matching reality. Be it on this trip coming up or trips closer to my house, I'm always thinking about what might I expect with the wind or the tide or the current or these islands. And when things don't line up, that's a decision-making pause for me. Once the current was mapped out, everything else could be built around it. And for me, that's chart work. Now, finding charts for this area, at least charts that I like to use, was difficult. I don't like those enormous rectangle paper nautical charts, the kind of that you see on my wall behind me. Those are great for the wall for me. These are very difficult from the deck of a kayak. I like to have charts that are easily managed, easily foldable, and waterproof that I can use on my kayak. After a lot of searching, I did find a great resource, and I'll share a link to that in the document that I mentioned with all the resources for this Saguenay trip, should you want to do it. So I found a chart that's usable, and then I just started to put sticky notes on the chart of the different pieces of information. Where campsites were, where places we could get off the water safely were, where fresh water sources would be based off of studying Google satellite view, what the tide would be doing at different parts of the fjord based on my research. I even wrote down the magnetic declination on the compass rose, so I didn't have to guess. Wait, what was it? Was it 14 degrees or 18 degrees? I had it written down, and if I forgot, I could look down on any page of this chart book, get that information, and get the bearing I needed. So I put all of that on sticky notes, and then I transferred it to handwritten notes. That way, everything I need is ready to go right in front of me when I need it. I'm not hunting through my phone. I'm not working off of memory. I'm not flipping through pages of a notebook. I've got the info I need for the area that I am right where I need it. I put in the work ahead of time to get my kit sorted, or my preferred camping meals organized, or the logistics from getting from here to Canada sorted. And then I looked to find what the trickiest or most challenging considerations would be on this trip, filling in enough detail so I could build the map in my mind of what I might expect. And then I captured all of that information in a format and a way that was going to be usable for me. At this point, my map is as complete as it can be without having been there. It is not perfect. I still don't exactly know what the current feels like at Cap de la Boule on an ebb tide, but I know enough to meet it. And while my trip is in another country, a few hours away from home, I use similar things in my backyard. And so can you. It's not just about large trips. I do a version of this for day trips. Knowing what I might bump into before I get there goes a long way to making good decisions on the water. Friends, if you want a copy of the info and data and guidelines that I found for the Saguenay trip, as well as some other valuable information that I found, you can go to csteveckayak.com/free stuff and get that PDF, as well as a few other goodies. While I wish I could take you all with me on this trip, that's not going to be an option, but I'm going to be thinking about all of you while I'm out there. I hope this was helpful to see how I thought about planning for this trip, and it gave you a few new ways to think about planning for your trips. All right, friends, I need to get packing because we're leaving soon, so we're going to wrap this one up. Friends, I hope you enjoy your adventures, whatever they are, and until next time, safe paddling. Bye for now.